Hey everybody, I'm so excited. Welcome to the Goddess Real and Raw Conversations with Extraordinary Women. And today I have a fantastic guest who I admire and respect so deeply. Her name is Meggan Waterson. We have her bio and all her, books and her fantastic Divine Feminine Oracle. Everything that you need to know about her is below the video. But she is a Hay House author. She wrote one of the most profound books that I have read around, really being a woman, being conscious, being spiritual, which is called Reveal. She is working on releasing now a book about Mary Magdalene. So anyway, just welcome. I'm dying to talk to you. The erasure, this is what came to me as well too, is the erasing of the truth of our history.
Right.
Our history. And again, like you said, it's not just, we're not talking about the goddess or my goddess deck or your deck. We're talking about our history and what brought us to where we are now. So let's chat about that, because I know you're like such a scholar around the divinity piece, and I'm fascinated with it.
So I really wanted to figure out why I had such an aversion. I had like this aversion to Christianity. I was like afraid of Christianity, and yet I was compelled to figure out why, why I had when I first encountered the Bible, I broke out in hives. Like reading how the New Testament was laid out and how women were portrayed and what was said, it really freaked me out, like physically, and so that for me was like in Zen Buddhism, there's this idea of a koan, and it's like this riddle, right? That you like have to live into, you have to figure out how to answer. And that breaking out of hives in reading the New Testament for me was like solving this riddle. Why am I so, distraught and yet have this much emotion around? I wasn't raised religious. I was raised feminist. I wasn't raised religious at all. I was the only one who ever wanted to talk about, where did we come from, guys? And where do we go, when we die? Like, no one wanted to talk about it. And so I went to church on my own, like really pushed, wanting. And after having that experience, though, I couldn't go back, after really encountering how Christ is portrayed, how, women were portrayed in the New Testament, it just really deeply disturbed me. Right. So I left the church and I literally spent the next decade studying every other religion except Christianity. Like I went, I first got a theological degree and I studied the Divine Feminine in all other religions because it was like I couldn't handle Christianity yet, It was like, so I found Kali in Hinduism, I found Green Tara was a love of mine in Buddhism, and these incredible stories of these divine beings that sort of to me felt healing and felt powerful because I hadn't seen images of the ultimate embodied in a female form. So that was huge for me. And then I knew I was going to have to return ultimately to Christianity. So then I also got my Master's of Divinity. And I went, everybody else at divinity school, they're all being trained to be ministers, and like that it's like you don't go unless you're going to be ordained. So I'm the one like unicorn among horses, just kind of sitting there. Like a little secret agent trying to figure out where did women go? Because there's no way, if Christ is the Christ that I know he was, there's no way women were meant to be erased. So where did that Christ go and where did women go? What happened, And I believed that was why my body responded in the way it did originally, was because that was missing. And that's not something you learn. That's something that
is in you.
It's in you. It's a soul thing. It's an imprint.
Yep.
I just knew, that there was more. But I didn't know, didn't know what I was going to find. I just knew that I had to return to the source of what made me so, enraged.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question with that? So
Yes.
I experienced probably the worst grief I'd ever had. When I said yes to Hay House when they asked me if I wanted to do the goddess deck, and Jenna and I had talked about it off and on for 10 years, but I just wasn't attracted to it. But I thought I wasn't attracted to it because I was looking at it as like a dress up, girls dressing up as, right? But it was because I was trying to resist my deepest grief. Like I had so much grief because when I went and did all the research, like I'm an academic like you, although I didn't finish a degree, and I certainly just sat there for a good 6 months. My poor husband, as I sobbed in bed, reading all this archaeological content, and the cultural historian, Rianne Eisler, who's also one of the speakers here, about, how we were annihilated around the Old Testament, not the New Testament.
Right.
So it was like, I was just like, and then I realized that it was not my projection. The judgment came from, I was afraid of my own grief as a woman for being annihilated. And also because I'm a divination expert, it was demonized early on in the Old Testament, why it was to suppress women. So, and that's another reason why you and I both shared a connection to Mary Magdalene, right? It's like, for me, it's like, that's wrong what they said about her. So I'd love to segue into that because I know that that's huge passion for you.
Yes. So what I found in divinity school was what are referred to as the Gnostic Gospels.
Yes.
It's very, very important to elucidate that what are termed Gnostic Gospels, they're actually early Christian texts. These are some of the earliest texts and scripture that we have about Christianity. So there were, after Christ, there were all these strands of Christianities. There were all these ideas of who Christ was. And one of that strand was Mary Magdalene, and was a lineage that believed that Christ had given to her secret teachings, what had been hidden from the disciples, which was, as I know you probably already know, a way of connecting from within, of being able to go into the heart and actually vision. Her gospel is the only gospel that talks about how we can directly connect.
Yes, direct. So when you saw that, so again, I want your personal journey, because I mean, you are a living embodiment of what you've learned.
Right.
So what happened to you when you first saw that? Like, cause it's huge. I mean, you must have felt the grief and the anger and like, cause I sure did, you must have.
Yes. When she spoke within her gospel, I sobbed. But that wasn't grief. That was a joy that I can't even articulate. Because it was like, in recovering her voice, in hearing her voice, I felt the presence of my own. Mm-hmm. Like, in recovering a voice that ancient, that had been buried and literally destroyed. The first 7 pages of her gospel are missing. It starts on page 7. And then the middle of her gospel, when Mary asked Christ, so now he praises her for seeing him, because what she's relating is all taking part in a vision. So she's connecting with him in the gospel from inside her own heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she asks him, how is it now that I'm seeing you? With what, spiritual aperture? Like, how is it that somebody is able to receive a vision? Like, is it with his soul? Is it with his spirit? What is it? And Christ is just about to answer her. How is it that she's seeing him from within her? Like, how they're having this conversation, from within our own heart. And then those pages are also missing, those 3 pages. And that to me that's not an accident. That was intentional, because that was the way that that was Christ's, the conversation he had with his beloved about how we can see from within ourselves, how we can ultimately see vision, like how we can receive the divine from within our own hearts. I mean, that is, if if you can do that, then no one outside of you has power over you.
Right. When I was 8, I had a vision of Mary Magdalene, and she came to me in a dream, like a meditation dream. And it was the most profound sense of self-worth that she gave me. I don't know how you understand that, right? So all the things that I was acknowledged as good.
Right.
And I don't know how else to describe it. And she came through my throat. So when I got the record deal, which was impossible, I was 40 years old when EMI Music signed me, and I recorded Magdalene's Garden with my partner, and that song is dedicated to her. And I was scared to say it because I was saying, you know, what if like the garden is like Christ and the Magdalene together, you know, could come together. And it's much more of a, for us, you know, the living experience. That's what Gnostic is. It's an experience, it is a personal experience. That's what it means. Right. And so of course
experience. Yep.
You know, the Gnostic Gospels, Elaine Pagel's work, and the Nag Hammadi library, which you're talking about, and all the things that were taken from us are not taken from us. And I think that's where, for the moment, for the moment I had felt that. But then I went back, and I'm going to ask you about this because maybe you're different, but I got shut down again. Like, I think maybe because I was dealing with the patriarchal system of the record business, right? Like I was too old. I was not skinny enough. I was none of these things, right? And I felt like, wow, I was being silenced, right? So then I ended up going to Hay House. But it was this, right? It was this, okay, I'm going to go over here. But it was like a sense of, I wonder for women today, because all of us are in and out, I think, because we've all had some deep trauma in different ways, like very different, right? You know, like women of color have completely different trauma. Right. Everybody has their own trauma that is coming up for everyone right now. Right. And how do you experience that, like, and heal it? Because I know you have these amazing workshops about it. I'm trying to.
Well, so for me personally, what I can speak from is I had physical trauma, sexual assault. And I think that aspect that you said about worth is so intrinsically linked to Mary Magdalene. At the end of her gospel, all the two main disciples, Andrew and Paul, they question everything she's revealed to them. Even though Paul was the one who originally, or Peter was the one who originally said, you know, tell us, sister, we know that Christ loved you more than all other women. He says this at the beginning of her gospel. Mm-hmm. Tell us the things that you know, which we do not, because they have not been shown to us. And so she reveals throughout the gospel all these things that have been hidden from them. And then Peter at the end uses the word worth in relation to not being able to believe that Christ had given her these teachings and not them. How can she, a woman, be worthy of these teachings? So for me, that was so profound, because I think it is so crucial to being able to use our voice. Yeah,
to articulate.
To really claim that worth within us, to know that it's not anything of this world, right? Like we're never going to prove, we're never going to earn our worth. It's something we have to claim because it is innate. It is our birthright. It is not something we have to prove. And then we reclaim that voice as well. Then we can use that voice when we remember we're worthy, of course, to such proximity to the divine, because we are, because this is within us.
But I believe so many women, their worth is related to their capacity for sexuality. I mean, ageism says we should be discarded. We're no longer childbearing. I think that we have a giant amount of healing everybody to do. Everybody has their own version of it, right? But so what are some of the things that you believe about that healing and bringing women into a new version of themselves around worthiness?
I do feel that it's collective, because for so long that was our worth. Our worth was tied up to our sexuality, and if we were going to produce children, you know, just that was what gave us a right to be alive and a right to have, you know, safety, security. It was through our sexuality. And what's so powerful and fascinating to me now is in restoring this gospel, like for me, what's so powerful about the gospel is that of Mary Magdalene is that you're seeing a woman who was really given a transmission that was saying, not only was she worthy, she was really uniquely positioned to receive these teachings in particular. Yeah. The feminine,
yes,
something
there we go.
Teach everyone, male, female, everyone, the feminine, like to have Christ's teachings, but to come through a woman, that this had value, this had particular, there was a particular worth to this. And we weren't ready for it 2,000 years ago. We are ready for it now. Not only are we ready for it, we're dying for it, literally.
Dying for it.
We have to have this sense of balance that we are all, because here's what comes through then, when you understand that the female is as holy and as worthy as the male, you begin to understand this power with, right? That there is no system of hierarchy. That doesn't exist in the spiritual world. There's no such thing. That one being, and a certain form of existence can rate above the other. That doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And this gospel speaks of God is not a father. God is simply the good.
The good. That was what really struck me too, that God is the good.
God is the good.
And that, you know, the feminine principle of the universe was deified as a goddess because way back when, because it was obvious that birth came through a female body, but it was never about one against the other. Right. It was a partner, and that God or goddess, whatever we want to name it, it is our partner and lives in our hearts. Right. And what we see now, I think, on the stage, we're looking at the social stage right now, is and I'm specifically talking about women in this moment, is this unraveling of the internalized patriarchy, right? And because within us, it's like, you know, how that model of thinking that there's not enough to go around, and you have to compete for limited resources. Right. You know, the idea, the power to take away, or the power to, because that, you know, patriarchy, the whole function of patriarchy is the worship of being able to take life. That's what militarization is. But with the feminine, it's the ability to give life and to create life. And so we can't go back to what was. We have to find the balance now. Right? Without trying to eliminate patriarchy, we have to heal anyway. That's what I believe. Right. Like, we can't eliminate something. We can try, but it's pretty well clear that it's everywhere. And I think the more each woman heals, like what you said, it's a collective thing. Eventually that loses power.
Yes, it's collective, absolutely. But we each, I mean, it's so hard sometimes to believe that if you heal yourself, you're somehow, you know, it can feel selfish. It can feel like, you know, you're going inward and, you know, you're doing all this work and it's isolating you. When, you know, in reality, what's really happening is when you free yourself, you are, like, when you really heal those deep wounds and relate to yourself in a way that is actually deeply loving and is a power with, it creates these pathways and this possibility for those around you to experience that, and also to begin to want that for themselves. And so it's collective, but we address it, you know, one world at a time. You know, we have to heal our own world, and for me, it's going inward and really figuring out, you know, what we're in Mary's gospel, she talks about these 7 demons. She calls them powers. They later in Christianity became, you know, the 7 deadly sins and got referred to as demons. But in her gospel, it's just referred to as power.
Mm-hmm. Very different. Very different.
Very, very different, because they're not demonized. Right. There's no such thing as sin in the gospel. Right.
Sin means to miss the mark.
Exactly.
That's what it means, right? It's a Greek term, to miss the mark. It doesn't mean bad.
So really what she explains in her gospel is that these 7 powers are the powers of the ego that we all possess. And what they do is they cloud our remembrance of the soul.
Right.
And so when we miss the mark is when we act from one of those powers, and we forget also that we are this soul inside of us. So we act from, rage is one of them, the compulsion for rage. That's one of the powers. So it's like when we act from that and only that, and completely forget that we are also a soul.
The internet has fosters outrage right now. It really does. I mean, it's because there's a place there where people can have the ability to say whatever. And I recognize that there's a difference between discussion and the projection of rage. Very, very different. But we have to kind of allow ourselves to dial it back until we get to a place there can be possible communication. Because right now, those powers are very active everywhere as our stability is challenged.
Right.
Our stability is being challenged. And so the inner victim is being invited to dance, these shadows. Right. So we kind of have to remember that, when that happens. And it's hard because you want to defend yourself. Right. You want to go whoa, right? But really it's okay. Let's dance. Kung fu, let it go by you.
Yes, these are, she refers to them as that they're fetters. This is what binds the soul, these powers. They entrap us in this oblivion again. When we're completely guided by one of these powers, we forget the ultimate. We forget the love, right? That we're here to speak on behalf of and to act on behalf of. And I believe that we can act with righteous indignation on behalf of those who are experiencing injustice, but there's a way to move from the soul of love within us.
Very different.
It's very different. You can feel it. And it's almost as if the whole universe conspires to help those who are acting on behalf of, injustice and out of love. Because, as much as we've seen hate and violence and the darkness that has always existed and always been going on, all coming up. As much as we've seen that, we're also seeing the miracles. And when I say miracles, I just mean, to me, it's when love becomes manifest. When we see this limitless, just inexhaustible amount of love that we all possess inside us, when we see it in action. And those moments have happened as well. I mean, the Women's March is a miracle to me.
I've seen more of this, to be honest.
Yeah.
I only brought the other one up because I think that a lot of people are hurting.
Yeah.
And let's just be honest, people are hurting. They think that there's not enough. They think that, they want revenge, or they're like the movements of, and yes, we're taking down that which is, which has harmed us, etc. It kind of goes all over the place though. So then everybody's like, oh yeah, me too. I'm like, and we get to a place where personally, where I say, in my mindfulness practice every day is that I'm going to look for the love and the miracles. And I'm telling you, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it every day. I see it 10 times more than I see the other, but the other is there. But we forget when we're in the other that the rest exists.
Right. Yeah. And it's both.
So where are you dancing with your work right now? Because, I know that you're not a particularly out there kind of person, right? So you develop and gestate, and you sit on your cosmic egg. But I think your work is probably the most profound out there. So what's new for you, and how are you looking to help women? Because I think it's mostly women that you're speaking to, but really women and everybody else too.
Yeah, women who don't, women affect everyone and everything. Yes. But so for me, this particular book, because of everything we've touched on in this conversation, about voice, about healing, to write about Mary Magdalene's gospel, and to really speak from that place of, wanting to teach what I hear when I read her gospel. And it took me through, because healing for me isn't linear. That's never been my experience.
Me neither.
It's cyclical. And at first, when you cycle back and you're like, oh God, here it is again, you think, I've fallen down this staircase and, I'm starting all over. When really, for me, what it is that the stronger I become, the deeper the healing can be. So the cycles allow me to go deeper each time. And this one was a reckoning, this layer of going back and healing it. The phrase that kept coming up is healing all the way back and all the way through.
Oh yeah. All the way back and all the way through.
So it's not just my life, and I know it's my life, but it's how you were saying about ancestral or the things that the lineage, that what comes down through us, encoded in DNA, encoded in our soul, like somehow in a psychic way. And how do I heal this idea of worth? How do I heal this idea that the female body is sacred? How do I heal this, repairing this misunderstanding that Mary Magdalene was the prostitute, did
you ever read that book, The Moon Under Her Feet? It's about Mary. She was a professor from a university, actually, I think in Illinois. She was a women's studies professor. Anyway, she wrote a book about Mary Magdalene and Christ's relationship. And she described Mary Magdalene as one of a lineage of Magdalenes, the Magdalene, who represented the goddess culture, where the sex rights, sexuality was something that was deemed very, very different. Right. And so that they, that she represented that the demonization of that culture. So because all of the women there, they called them prostitutes, and she was the main one, the iconic figure of the goddess culture. So I thought that was a very interesting segue, or around that, because that was one of the first books I read. I was like, what?
Well, she is associated with the Isis cults, and there are many people who believe that she was a priestess of an Isis cult, which focuses a lot on the energy that's within the body that we can tap into, and that if we are present and if we are aware of the soul while we're having sex, we can really open up into, realms that otherwise you can't if you're only acting from the physical body.
I can tell you that patriarchy doesn't want that. Like, whoa.
Right. But on, my work has mostly focused on what we can recover and what we know within history and within scripture. And there is a homily 33 from Pope Gregory. And this didn't happen until the 6th century, but it had a profound impact. That homily, he conflated two different passages. And the passage from Luke 8:2, where Mary Magdalene is said to have been healed of 7 demons. He conflated that. Right. And he assumed that those 7 demons then meant that she was a prostitute. That was the assumption he made.
The assumption, right. Mm-hmm.
So the Catholic Church has formally apologized for that and has said that was a mistake. Not until, the late 1960s, early 1970s. But what the reason for that, which scholars can attest to, is that the church was trying to form a hierarchy of only males.
That's right.
That hierarchy. And if the Magdalene received special teachings, and if she's referred to as, the one who Christ loved the most, more than all others, and
that's a problem.
That's a problem. And So not only get rid of Mary Magdalene's gospel, but also get rid of the other gospels that relate to her as being his companion. That's the word.
Yes, companion. That's right. It was erased.
Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas. They relate to her as having been his significant other.
Yeah.
So all of those had to be discredited. But the way to discredit Mary Magdalene was to refer to her as a prostitute rather than as being a teacher, right?
Yeah.
I would argue, if you really go back and you read everything and you read all of the Gospels, like you don't see the Gospel of Philip, for example, or the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. You don't see them as apocrypha. That's what they were labeled when they were like, okay, no, we can't have these because it doesn't make our story work. Like, how are we going to subjugate women and say that they are less than and say they aren't worthy of speaking on behalf of the divine if, Mary here is the one that received Christ's secret teachings? Like, that's not going to work. So like, but if we really look at all of that, there's the real objective was to displace her, discredit her, and disparage her as a teacher. So I would argue, when you really look through everything, she was the first apostle. Of course, she still isn't. She's called the apostle to the apostles, but she's still not an apostle.
Right.
I would argue, as a scholar, as someone who's devoted not just my own spiritual work, but also my academic work to her, she would be the first apostle. And the thing that's always moved me the most is, even within what they created of the Bible, of the story of Christ, Mary is the one that sees him first.
Right.
Like, she's the one there at the tomb. Now, what's always been so fascinating to me is, like, when I first read that, I was, kind of looking around at everybody else like,
anybody notice this?
That's not an accident. She didn't just happen to be walking by the tomb. Like, she was there because she knew how to see him. She was the one who he could rise to because, first of all, that was their love. But second of all, she was the only one who could see him, who could receive him from within her. She was seeing him from within her. And this is what she wanted to give to us, was that capacity to be able to receive directly these messages from within, which then makes us dangerous and threatening, because we don't need any authority outside of us to tell us we are worthy of such proximity to the divine, or we need some sort of intermediary, some sort of middleman. We don't. And it's really hard to create an ultimate power and, an authority like the church has created, if you have that capacity within you.
Christ, if you look at it from the perspective of the scholarly academic research that you have done, and we know for sure that if you put this puzzle together, this is exactly what it means. He was challenging the patriarchy. Exactly. So he himself was because the established patriarchy had existed for quite a long time, right. At least 1,000 years at that point. So it was well established that women were not to have power. So the fact that he elevated a woman, that he did that, right?
Sense.
Right? So
the first is going to be the last, right? Yeah. He wanted to stand that hierarchy on its head, and a woman had no more powers than a slave. A woman was,
we were chattel. We were like.
So of course he would give the secret teachings to a woman, because then it would ask of the disciples to actually receive that teaching if they could believe her, but they couldn't.
No. Well, here we are. How many thousand years later? And all of us are really trying to find a better way to be, especially women with women and women with men. I think men have also been very, very affected in a negative way by the
system. Absolutely. And there are a lot of men becoming vocal about toxic masculinity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think we're really at what I wanted to do with this series. It's really a beginning of a conversation. I don't think any of us have the final answer, but I want to go on the journey until it's time for me to cross to discover what the answers are, because we're just beginning this conversation. I think this is an extraordinary one that is meant to unearth us now. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be, because, the stuff is conditioned into us for thousands of years.
Right.
And it's going to be messy. So tell me a little bit, when is your book coming out?
It's coming out in July. We wanted to have it the same month as her feast day, which is July 22nd. So it's going to be July 9th. And it's called Mary Magdalene Revealed. The first apostle.
I can hardly wait.
Gospel and the Christianity we haven't tried yet.
Oh my God. Okay. You have me to help you on this one. Okay. Like, you totally, wherever I can spread this around, because connecting to her changed me in a way that began my healing, to be quite honest, right? Even though I was sober a long time, it began my healing around my sexuality, my worthiness. I met my husband after that. It was she who gave me the permission. Do you know what I mean? Or like to recognize that I could give myself that. So I'm in there for you. This video we're recording it in December. You guys are going to see it probably February, March of this year. So, thank you. Meggan Waterson, you are just a bright light in this world, and I am so grateful that you were there. I admire your scholarliness. I'm a big academic, and I believe you need to research things like I do. I never think I know enough.
Yeah, we have to educate ourselves.
Yes, and ask my husband. I've got stacks of books all over the house. He rolls his eyes. Are you reading again? Yes. But you are, I think, one of our most formidable teachers now in this, and I will follow you. Bless you.
I love you. And I'm very grateful for the support that I've received from you over the years, especially in relation to Mary Magdalene, because I've needed it. It's really, in
You're gonna make me cry.
her voice. We need each other to find our own. And I've needed the sisterhood. So thank you.
Well, there's more coming. Oh, my internet just went, and I put fake eyelashes on this morning, and now they're coming off me like caterpillars. Oh my God, don't make me cry. Okay, all right, everybody. This was Meggan Waterson and me, and this was just a casual, the Goddess Real and Raw conversations with extraordinary women. I'm so proud, and thank you for your time and also your dedication. Like I said, I'm going to go to your, whatever you need.
Love
and
you.
I really hope a lot of women really got a lot out of this today, because I heard it. Mwah, love you.
Love you.
Bye.